Hi, I'm Yue Xu.
And I'm Julie Kraftchick.
We're active daters turned dating insiders.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to DATEABLE. Hello, friends.
Welcome back to another episode of DATEABLE.
Do you feel like you're in a period of uncertainty?
Who doesn't?
Yeah. Who doesn't? There is so much uncertainty in my life, in the world, in the people around me. There's just uncertainty is the norm, it feels like. And our guest today is someone who studies uncertainty and how to navigate these uncertain times. His name is Simone Stolzoff.
Yes. And we wanted to talk to him. It was actually a serendipitous moment. I had an old coworker reach out to me to reconnect after decades. And he was like, you know what? You should meet my friend. And he told me, and at first I was like, uncertainty, dating. And I'm like, oh, uncertainty and dating. These really go together. He actually could be a really great guest. And he shared that he has this new book that came out that's called How Not to Know. So he's leaning into being uncertain, but he's also the author of The Good Enough Job. And he's really talked about just like how you could thrive in an uncertain world. And his work has been featured in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Wall Street Journal, The Washington Post, and he even did a TED Talk. So really insightful journalist who's been diving into this world, and we loved applying this conversation to dating and relationships.
Yeah, and that's what we did here. We wanted to focus the conversation around dating. And what are 3 traps that make us believe that there is certainty where none really exists?
Yeah, so it's liberating to realize like you're only fooling yourself if you think that you can. And I think both of us were able to identify with some of these traps and how they've played into our dating and relationships. And we really do go through like a bunch of different scenarios at all stages of a relationship and dating. So it's really fun to kind of go into that lens of looking at it like, okay, what do you do? These are the common things we hear. And like, what do you do when you're basically surrendering and being like, it's okay to be uncertain?
And the one skill you're gonna build after this episode is your uncertainty tolerance in an uncertain world, and building up this tolerance, kind of like rejection tolerance that we've talked about before too, will really help you see uncertainty as an opportunity as opposed to just something that's out of your control.
I mean, I know in dating, that's what got me, like this, like the early stages of just not knowing what was happening because you don't really know the person and you don't know what they're coming into this with. Like, are they ready for a relationship? Are they still hung up on their ex or talking to like 10 other people at once? You have no idea what's going on in their lives. So it's a very uncertain time. And for me, it just led to so much anxiety. So I wish I had some of these tools and built this uncertainty tolerance back then. I mean, eventually I got there, but you know, I think having this information would have made it a lot easier.
And it will help you embrace uncertainty as well. Most of us just want to run away or want answers. We want definitive answers all the time. And in this conversation, you'll see sometimes it's not necessary for growth. You might just need to be in a period of unknown.
Right. I love that reframe, that this actually can be a good thing. So yeah, he helped me. You'll see a few times during this call that I was just like, I need to re-listen to this and I need to really hone in on this because my thoughts can go to some crazy places and it's just not helpful. Not helpful.
Nope.
Okay, well, another way to hone in your thoughts, check out our AI-powered dating coach. If you want a place to put those thoughts down, and it can also reassure you that it's all going to be okay, or at least give you some of these tools. You know, this episode is getting fed into it too. So asking about uncertainty, that's the coolest part about this AI-powered coach that we have through studio.com. It's feeding all of the courses we've done, the insights we've learned, all the episodes we put out there. They're all there. It will recommend things for you to listen to if that's your jam. It will help you, do live journaling and give you instant feedback. You can record even. There's just so many things it does. So check out studio.com/dateable. You can see all the features there and how it can help you. And yeah, check it out for the free trial and give it a try.
Yeah. And let us know what you think. Give us some feedback too. And one last piece of resource for you all to navigate a time of uncertainty is our book, How to Be Dateable. It's out. It's everywhere. You cannot dodge it because trust me, it's everywhere. But it's full of information to help you understand what you want in dating, finding your North Star, so that even in periods of uncertainty, you don't feel derailed because you are on the right path.
And it helps build that self-trust that's so needed in dating. And that's really the only way that you can get through uncertainty at the end of the day.
So true.
Okay. Well, before we get into it with Simone, or Simo, as he goes by for short, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors.
If there's one thing I'm prioritizing right now, it's sleep. Because when my sleep is off, everything's off. My mood, my energy, how I show up in my relationships. So this is where Avocado Green Mattress has sleep all figured out. Their certified organic mattresses are specifically designed to relieve pressure points, support your body the way it needs, and help you actually get the deep, restorative sleep you've been missing. Every mattress is made with thoughtfully sourced materials and built with real care, so you can get incredible sleep night after night. Now, when I invest in something I use every single day, I want it to be made with real care, not just mass-produced. Avocado Green Mattress is exactly that. Supportive, comfortable, and thoughtfully crafted. It's a long-term investment that actually feels like one. Avocado products are made, not manufactured, and thoughtfully crafted with real materials to deliver lasting comfort and support. Go to avocadogreenmattress.com/dateable to check out their mattress and furniture sale. That's avocadogreenmattress.com/DATEABLE. avocadogreenmattress.com/dateable.
I've been all about building an intentional wardrobe, leaning into pieces that are timeless, comfortable, and look put together. When I have all my go-to staples, it just makes getting dressed that much simpler. And you all know that Quince is my absolute favorite place to get fabrics that feel elevated and fits that are flattering. My latest obsession is their short sleeve cashmere shirts. I bought 2 in different colors, a pale pink and yellow. Both go so well with the pants I also have from Quince, and I've been wearing this combo everywhere. Their cashmere is so soft, and I can't get over the price. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Refresh your every day with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/dateable for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/dateable for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/dateable. Okay, let's hear it from Simo all about navigating uncertainty and just admitting sometimes it's okay not to know.
To say that we're navigating a time of uncertainty right now is probably an understatement, but uncertainty is also one of the biggest challenges we face in dating and relationships because we always want to know concrete answers like, do they like me? Is this going somewhere? Am I just wasting my time here? So we want to get more clear in times of uncertainty, but how do we navigate that time?
And then sometimes maybe you can't get clear, and that's okay. And that's why we're excited to talk to our guest today. Welcome, Simo.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I guess, why do you think people struggle so much with uncertainty? Like, why is this something that keeps people up at night?
It's in our DNA. You can think back to our ancestors, maybe someone in the jungle, and they hear a rustling in the bushes. And if they were uncertain about the source of that noise, it could potentially be lethal. For our ancestors, uncertainty was really a matter of life or death. The problem is, because of the threat that uncertainty could have posed to a hunter-gatherer precursor to you and I, we often find false positives, which is to say that we think something is a threat when actually it might not be a matter of life or death. And so in today's day and age, there are so many potential uncertainties all around us, both in the world, things like what will the climate be like in the future, or will I be able to have a job in 10 years, or will he text me back? And in our professional lives or our personal lives as well. And so the problem is that sometimes we try to avoid uncertainty at the expense of discovery and growth. And so we try to banish uncertainty uncertainty from our lives when in actuality, uncertainty is an inevitable part of being a human being. And a life without uncertainty might not have that same serendipity or surprise or texture that gives our life so much meaning.
But for so many years, we've been hearing that we need to find clarity. We need to find answers. We need to find our fuck yes or fuck no. But in your book, and as you just mentioned, you think we have no choice but to live in an environment of uncertainty. Like, look at our jobs, relationships, climate change, AI. There's just so much uncertainty ahead of us and in front of us right now. So why do you think it's important for us to almost embrace this uncertain environment versus trying to find clarity all the time?
At the most basic level, it's because we don't have a choice. Dealing with uncertainty is an inevitable part of what it means to be human. And I think a lot of the dissonance or the problems occur when we look for certainty where there is no certainty to be found. And so especially with anything that hasn't happened yet in the future, whether it's who will win the election or when the market is going to crash or how the relationship will end, we often try to grasp for certainty. We want to be able to plan everything in the future. We want to know exactly how the relationship is going to go. But that searching for certainty where it's not possible to be found can set us up for disappointment, for unrealistic expectations, and paralysis. By not exposing ourselves to uncertainty, we never discover the possibilities that might lie on the other side of our discomfort.
So I feel like this is something we hear all the time, that people just like struggle with this uncertainty in dating. And then, even in relationships, like who knows what will happen in 20 years, and we can't predict the future. And like you said, it's clearly beyond just relationships. It's all parts of life. Why do you think uncertainty is such a focus right now? Like clearly this has happened in past generations. You pointed out in your book, we're not the first era to experience this. Like, why do you think it's such a hot topic?
I think there's two things going on. One is there is just a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. When you think about wars overseas or the threat of AI, or you think about, the job market. And so there's this cloud of uncertainty that hangs over all of us. But I think the biggest thing that particularly is relevant to today and relevant to the dating world is the rise of smartphones and the internet, which has created the expectation that answers should be readily available. So there's this really fascinating study that I quote in the book that shows basically the rise of the internet is correlated with a rise of intolerance for uncertainty. And I think a few things are going on. One is when we're carrying around these computers in our pockets, they bring all of the uncertainties of the world right to us. So now we can track, say, a war going on overseas, or whether they've read your last message on Hinge in real time. And they also rob us of the practice of sitting with what we don't know. So whereas maybe 10 years ago, I might have been okay not knowing the name of a given actor, now I feel an almost involuntary need to reach into my phone.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true in the dating world. Maybe a decade or two ago, you would have to wait to see if they would call you back or when you would see the person next. But now with that opportunity for always on communication, there's always the anxiety of worrying about what might come in next or not come in at all.
What we find with dating is that there is productive uncertainty and there's unproductive uncertainty. So productive uncertainty is, let's see where this goes. I have an open heart, open mind. Dating someone outside of my usual type is uncertain, but I'm curious. The unproductive uncertainty is, does this person like me? Are we still seeing each other on Wednesday, even though we made plans on Monday? When they said this, did they really mean it, etc.? So we find that to be unproductive. In your research, do you find that also exists in other parts of life? Is that a good way of looking at uncertainty?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that we need both certainty and uncertainty in our life. It's not a matter of going full extreme on one end or the other. And actually having certainty about some aspects of our life makes it easier to hold uncertainty in others. So I think part of the reason why commitment and relationship can make us feel so safe and secure is because it feels like something that we can rely on. It makes prediction about the future a little bit easier. It makes it easier to be able to plan. And so we want to have partners that give us the confidence to say, if they make plans plans on Wednesday that they're going to follow through, or if they say that, you're the only person that I'm seeing, that's honest, or if they want to commit to something like marriage, that is a commitment that they are going to honor. The thing that often gets people tripped up is the desire for certainty about exactly how an entire relationship will go. So I have a lot of friends who might go on a first date and immediately they want to know, okay, are we going to get engaged within the next year? Like, how many kids do they want? And our sort of natural desire to sort of spin these loops about what the future might hold. And similarly, our tendency to catastrophize or think about all of the worst case scenarios when you're faced with a moment of uncertainty. So maybe they don't text you back exactly when you think they're going to text you back, and then you make up this story in your mind about how, they don't like me anymore, maybe they're out seeing someone else, yada, yada, yada. And if we're able to maintain that space of not knowing, to be comfortable enough in uncertainty to let reality emerge, then we can more gracefully adapt to whatever comes our way, as opposed to this need for certainty, often where there's no actual certainty to be found.
In dating, like back when I was dating, I feel like the biggest challenge I had was like after like a great date or like a couple great dates, when the feelings started to come in, that I had to sit in that ambiguity of not knowing, like for sure what was going to come back. Like you were saying, like, will there be another date? Like, what advice like would you have for someone that is struggling to sit in that ambiguity and like really can't navigate the uncertainty or that finds it very difficult?
Yeah, I'll start by something I said earlier, which is about finding your anchors. And what I really like about this is you can think about the things that will remain constant in your life, even if there is some uncertainty. So if you're dating, maybe you can remind yourself of like your amazing friend group that will be by your side, regardless of whether you go on another date. Or you can remind yourself of your commitment to live in a particular place or your commitment to your values. Those anchors become like the boulders that will remain steady amidst all that is changing around you. Another thing that I'd recommend is that you have to cultivate faith. And by faith, I don't mean this in sort of like a religious context, more so in a sense of optimism or hope that things will work out for you. One way that you can do so is by looking at your past and other uncertain moments that you've been through before. So maybe in your romantic life or maybe outside of your romantic life, if you can think back at a time where you thought someone didn't like you, you thought someone wasn't going to text you back, and then they ultimately did. Or you could think back to a breakup, and maybe in the immediate aftermath of the breakup, you thought, my world is ending. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But then you think about where you were 6 months or a year later, and maybe it was a blessing in disguise or it opened up new opportunities. We are really bad at what psychologists call affective forecasting, which is our ability to predict how future events will make us feel. And so if we reserve our judgment about exactly what will happen in the future and exactly how whatever happens will make us feel, then we can be more open. I think that's sort of the central thesis of my book, How to Not Know, is that when we are certain, it closes our minds. It narrows us to one particular idea of what the future might look like. But when we're able to maintain uncertainty, maintain that level of not knowing, we stay open to more possibilities that may emerge.
I think what really helped me come out of this was less attachment to the outcome of a specific person and more of just like, again, it's the faith, what you just said. Like, I believe things are going to work out for me. If this person doesn't text me back, like, all good, there will be someone else, like having that notion.
Yeah. And one thing that I think can really help people, especially if you're in uncertainty in relationship, is understanding what your values are so that you can reaffirm that, if this person is ghosting me for 3 weeks, maybe they aren't the right person for me. And maybe you deserve someone who is like more communicative or more reliable in that way. And I think sometimes our desire for consistency or a desire to maintain a positive self-image or a desire to be liked by other people can cloud our more rational self that can see, oh, well, maybe this is a sign about the incompatibility of the situation more than it is my inability to, get them to text me back.
Kind of back to what both of you are saying, though, is what I'm grappling with. So a lot of people treat, back to this concept of anchors, which I love. A lot of people treat relationships like anchors. Their partner, who they marry or commit to, they want to treat that dynamic like an anchor. But we also treat it like the most volatile anchor because you never know what could happen in this future relationship. So my bigger question is, are we looking at relationships all wrong? Should we be anchoring not to relationships, these romantic relationships, but to faith and friendships? And these relationships are never treat them like anchors.
I do think relationships can be a great anchor in people's life, and that drives so much of why people are looking for a partner, or looking for long-term commitment. But it need not be the sole source of consistency or certainty in your life as well. I really like these idea that has been popularized by Eli Finkel and Esther Perel about the value of diversifying the sources of purpose and meaning and community beyond just your singular romantic relationship. And by having that broader approach of other anchors in your life beyond just the sort of romantic dyad, we can be more resilient in the face of change. It's more sustainable, and it creates better expectations for the romantic partnerships that we are in. And so similar to how an investor benefits from diversifying the sources of stocks in their portfolio because it allows them to ride some of the roller coasters of changes in the market, I think having a more diversified portfolio of meaning and connection in your life can be a great way to not be overly reliant and not have too high expectations about one particular person can deliver.
Let's hold that thought because we have a quick message from our sponsors. Your home is more than just furniture. It's an extension of who you are, and the details matter more than you think. Like a rug. The right rug can completely transform how a space feels. And that's why I'm obsessed with my Ruggable. I went with this warm, neutral, boho-inspired design for my living room with earthy tones and a fun pattern. And it instantly made the whole space feel more intentional. Like, oh, someone put some thought into this. And what sealed the deal for me is that it's completely machine washable. Like my dog Mojo does not care about interior design, and neither does Red Wine, apparently. So I've thrown it in the wash and it comes out looking brand new every time. It's built for real life. Refresh your home at Ruggable.com. Get 10% off your first order site-wide with promo code DATEABLE at Ruggable.com. That's RUGGABLE.com and use the code DATEABLE at checkout.
For all my fantasy romance lovers, there is a book for you to check out called Reign of Shadows and Endings by Melissa K. Rorick. It was an instant New York Times bestseller and started as a huge indie book talk hit. So if you've seen people raving online, this is the book. If you love dark romantasy, this one delivers. It's got fae, dragons, gods, shifters, vampires, basically everything you want, plus a really unique twist with modern technology woven into the fantasy world. It truly felt like you were being transported into a new world as I was reading this, which to be honest was the relief I needed for the crazy world we're living in. What I really liked too was that this series emphasizes mental health as the female main character is battling depression and anxiety, which ends up being a major plot point for the book. It's on sale now, so if you've been looking for your next fantasy binge, this is it. You can find Reign of Shadows and Endings by Melissa K. Rorick wherever books are sold in print and ebook. I think some of it probably comes down to adaptability too, right? Because like, for instance, like my husband is my anchor. Obviously, I don't want anything to happen to him in that, but I can't predict the future. And I don't think that should like prevent you from taking the leap with someone that you're afraid maybe one day you'll grow apart or like a tragedy will happen or something totally out of your control. I mean, I stay up at night thinking about this, and that's unproductive uncertainty, right? At the end of the day. But we see a lot of times like people we talk to that are afraid to even get into relationships in the first place because of like what will happen in 20 years. How do you start to like level set that the risk is still worth it, even if it's uncertain?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is a framing problem where sometimes when you look at an uncertain situation, we anchor, to use that word again, to the sort of worst case scenarios or everything that can go wrong. This is sort of a canonical psychological finding, which is that losing something feels worse than gaining something feels good. And so that loss aversion keeps us often from even trying to, say, put ourselves out there. But I think that it's really important to recognize that on the other side of uncertainty is also possibility. It need not be a threat or always a source of fear, and it takes a certain mentality shift to be able to choose curiosity over fear, to be able to say, yes, this is an uncertain situation. There is risk. There's a chance that this might not go exactly how I want it to go. But that risk is sort of the cost of doing business to find love. And also, if I'm able to expose myself to this uncertain situation, I might be able to find things that I didn't even know existed or weren't even part of my sort of set of possibilities. There's this concept from statistics that I really like called a local maxima, which is sometimes you are standing on the top of a mountain and you think that you're on top of the world, but actually there's a higher peak that's sort of around the corner. And in order to find that higher peak, you have to be able to face the uncertainty. You have to be willing to descend to be able to see the possibility lying on the other side. And I think it's a great metaphor for dating. You know, so many of us that are in sort of a dating place might choose comfort over the uncertainty that might be provided. So maybe that means going back to an ex or staying in a relationship that you know isn't quite working for you just so that you can have sort of the devil you know. But I think what it means to be on the market or dating or putting yourself out there or putting yourself first means being willing to forego some of that comfort in favor of the learning and the growth that comes for exposing yourself to uncertainty. And you think about, you know, without uncertainty, there would be no butterflies of maybe so on a first date. There would be no sense of serendipity or surprise. Uncertainty is part of what makes dating rewarding and fun. You shouldn't want to know exactly how your future is going to go, or the feeling of like acting out a play that you've already acted out before, or on a conveyor belt going toward a known destination. If you can see the curiosity in the uncertainty, that allows you to open your mind to what might emerge.
Yeah, that's where we say the magic happens, is in that uncertainty of not knowing. And we feel like dating is very much missing that these days because we're being very formulaic in the way we approach dating now. And we're missing that like serendipitous unknown that could happen. And what I'm hearing you say, there is a nuanced layer to uncertainty, which is for uncertainty to play out in a way that benefits us, we almost have to be certain about the uncertainty. Like, I am certain that I'm going to take on this opportunity, for example, to get in a relationship with this person, knowing I don't know completely if this is the person for me, but I am signing up for this 100%, this uncertainty. And that's kind of the only way we can take action, is to be certain about the uncertainty.
Yeah, I call it uncertainty tolerance, you know, and one of my favorite definitions of uncertainty is a sense of doubt that prevents you from taking action. And I think that is really the risk of not developing a tolerance for uncertainty, is that you remain paralyzed. You never go out on the date. You never send the text. You never approach that person that you want to see. I think a good metaphor is the information gathering that we often do with restaurants these days. There's so much information out there, and you have the opportunity to read every single review and scour the menu and figure out exactly what you want to order. And there are some benefits to that.
Yeah.
You know, you get more context. You hopefully can choose restaurants that fit your tastes. But there's also some loss to it, because I think about happiness as sort of the difference between our expectations and our reality. And if we're always entering into new situations with these sky-high expectations or this sense of exactly how it's going to go, it doesn't leave much room to be pleasantly surprised.
So funny. I'm so that person that will like look up every last thing and make sure like I'm
Same.
ordering like the best thing. And like my husband like will never look ahead. Like we show up, he has no idea what's on the menu, and I'm like, I already know what I'm ordering, you know?
I love that. Yeah. You're probably the person that loves to watch the movie trailer and read the Rotten Tomatoes reviews, you know?
All of it. I think like when you were talking about uncertainty and staying in the comfort, it really rang true for me. And like obviously in relationships, completely see that. I think even something like I was thinking of an example that you and I are going through on our business side, actually, of like making a switch potentially. And I think like when I think of that, there's a part of me that's scared that like if we leave what's okay, what's working but not great, are we going to end up with zero? In that like scarcity mindset. And I think that also comes over for relationships, especially if you're like dating someone like that you like it's good enough, or like you're in a relationship where it's good but not great. Like, are you afraid there's nothing better on the other side? And a lot of that's like the present bias coming in. How would you advise people to not think about like it in such a scarcity mindset and be okay taking that leap if like they know deep down like this isn't really what's working for me. And like, yes, it's scary. There might be a change that doesn't work out, but I also know staying stuck isn't helping.
Yeah, I think this is what it takes to take risks in your life. You have to approach it with some level of optimism. Instead of just asking yourself, what is everything that could go wrong? You have to ask yourself, what might happen if things go right? I'll tell you one example. I actually don't use this in the book from the business world that I think is illustrative of this point, which is that in the early 2010s, there was this really hot gaming startup called Tiny Speck. They were heralded as sort of the next big thing. They had raised tens of millions of dollars. Their launch was covered in the New York Times. They had tens of thousands of active players. And on paper, the company was doing really well. But the founder had this sneaking suspicion that they weren't on the right path, that the business wasn't actually sustainable. And so he did something that other people thought was crazy, which is sort of at the peak of the company's success, he decided to shut down the game. And he offered to make his investors whole, and he offered employees that wanted to leave the opportunity to leave. And then with the employees that was left, he decided to pivot the business to a completely different industry. And while they were building the game, they had this internal messaging tool that they had built so that they could collaborate. And that new business is now what we know today as Slack. And the founder is Stuart Butterfield. And, in talking to Stuart in interviews at the time, he said, we had no idea what the opportunity was before we decided to make this big leap. But it was by facing the uncertainty that we discovered the possibility lying on the other side. And I think the same could be true for an entrepreneur or someone that's in the dating world, which is he was willing to sort of walk down the peak, the local maxima, to find something that was higher on the other side. And, Slack became one of the fastest growing software companies of all time. They sold to Salesforce for, I think, $27 billion or something crazy. But I don't think the sort of moral of the story is like all is well that ends well. It is that we need to be able to expose ourselves to some level of risk in order to find these new peaks in our life. And I think that's what I would tell an entrepreneur, and that's what I would tell someone who is struggling to put themselves out in the dating world. You'll never find certainty unless you're willing to take action. There's like a metaphor that we used to use. I used to work at this company called IDEO that we used to use this metaphor all the time, which is that being an innovator is sort of like sitting on a rowboat on a lake that's shrouded in heavy fog. You might not be able to see very far in front of you or know exactly where you'll end up, but you have two jobs. The first is to have faith that you'll eventually reach land. Remember, you're on a lake. And then the second is to keep rowing. Yeah. And it's through the rowing, it's through the action that clarity begins to emerge. And I think that's a nice image for anyone who's on the dating market right now. It's like, you don't know exactly where it's going to go. You can't plan exactly how the relationship will unfold. But your job is to keep putting one foot in front of the other and have a little faith that maybe it'll work out.
So what I'm hearing you say is Allbirds is about to become the most successful AI company there ever was. Because they found
what an amazing pivot.
Some secret in their shoes.
I was like, is this from The Onion? Like, this doesn't even seem right.
But going back to your rowboat image, which it's very visceral for me. What we hear oftentimes for people in relationships, if we're doing this rowboat analogy, is they are certain in the beginning. They know exactly where their starting point was. And then they come upon this patch of fog where there's uncertainty in their relationship. And all they want to do is turn back the boat and go back to the beginning. Like they want to go back to that certainty of when they first started, dating this person. What is your advice to people who they should still keep rowing, but what could be on the other side of something like this in a relationship, in a period of uncertainty in the middle of a relationship?
Well, I think, at the beginning of a relationship, why it can sometimes feel like certainty is because you're projecting this image of what your partner is and what the relationship will be. And that feels really good. And then over time, you realize that you're not just dating like an archetype, you're dating a human being, and the relationship has its own sort of identity and culture. For the book, I interviewed John Gottman, the founder of the Love Lab at the University of Washington. And he said something really interesting to me. I was asking him about like uncertainty in relationships and how do you know if you found the one, et cetera. And the big high level piece of advice he gave me is that you have to know thyself. And if you know yourself, you should be able to withstand some of the slings and arrows that come from dating or putting yourself out there. And so, for example, I am like a naturally doubtful person. You know, the cliche among authors is that you write the book that you need to read.
Yep.
And so I wrote this book about like how to get better at dealing with uncertainty, because I am not necessarily very good at dealing with uncertainty myself. And so I've been married for about 3 years now. And I did a lot of like waffling back and forth before I proposed to my wife, and talking about it with friends and gathering all this information and trying to, you know, talk to my therapist about it. And in the beginning, I wondered, like, does my sense of doubt mean that this isn't the right relationship for me? And then, you know, I thought about John Gottman's sort of know thyself. And I realized, like, every decision in my life, I always like play devil's advocate for myself, and I'm just naturally doubtful. And this is sort of my process of getting to a place of making a decision. And there's this therapist who I really like named Rollo May, and his quote is that commitment is healthiest not in the absence of doubt, but in spite of doubt. Commitment is healthiest not in the absence of doubt, but in spite of doubt. And that thinking just like really resonates with me, because it's not that I need to like banish uncertainty from my mind or be sort of 100% sure before I act. It's actually through the commitment that I am able to see sort of the reasons why I committed.
You sound like my husband. Yeah, the same. I think though, it was funny. I remember like watching like some TikTok where a guy was like giving vows, and he was like, the fact that I'm up here today being the overthinker I am, and, you know, someone that cannot like navigate uncertainty, like I have thought through every reason of why I should not be here, and I have decided to be here, like I'm in it kind of thing.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, there's this philosopher that I spoke with for the book named Ruth Chang, and her whole like idea is about why hard decisions are hard to make. And what she says is that the reason a hard decision is hard is not because one option is clearly better than the other and you're just sort of too stupid to see the difference. The reason a hard decision is hard is because one path is better for some reasons, another path is better for other reasons, and neither path is better overall. And so her advice is to make a decision by whatever means you can, and then spend your energy retroactively convincing yourself that you made the right decision, which is to say that you have the ability to sort of weave the narrative of why you made the right choice. Instead of having to make the right choice, you can just make the choice right. And I think that is super important when it comes to relationships, because there's always going to be an opportunity cost. There always might be someone out there who's a little richer, a little more handsome, or a little more X, Y, or Z, but you have the ability to tell yourself the story of why you chose your beloved. And that is how you find some agency amidst all of the fog that might be in your mind.
So this is something we hear too from a lot of people, is like, how are you certain the person is right for you? And I think the answer is like, you can't be certain. And I think of that episode on, what was that show with Aziz Ansari, that
Modern Romance?
Modern Love?
No, not the book, but the TV show he did. Do you remember that? I don't know. Anyways.
Yeah, I watched it.
The TV show that he did like for a long time. There was this episode where him and his girlfriend at the time had to like give their relationship a score, like 1 through 10, like how certain they were. And I think they both said like 7, and they ended up like breaking up because they weren't at a 10. And then his like married coworker was like, you're never going to be at a 10. Like, what? You broke up because you're at a 7? And like, he was kind of like explaining like, that's just like not realistic. So I guess like, how do you accept that like, you're never going to be sure fully that like, this is the right person for you? Like, you can know in many ways, but like you said, there could be always someone else out there that could be the better person for you.
Yeah, Dan Savage, the love guru guy, has a great line about this where he says, there's no such thing as the one. There's like the 0.78 that we round out to 1. And I think that's like a nice way to think about it. My first book was called The Good Enough Job, and it was about how work can support our vision of a life well lived, as opposed to being sort of the central axis around which all of your life orbits. And I think the same can be true with relationships. Like, yes, we want to find the perfect partner and we want to find the one, but I think a more realistic framing is you want to find a good enough relationship, and you get to choose what good enough means to you. Maybe it's, you know, someone that has a certain set of values, or someone that has a certain level of income, or someone that is attractive to you in a certain way. But rather than aiming for perfection, aiming for sufficiency can be a much more empowering ideal to strive for. And so so when you are uncertain about the person, it's just a matter of you being able to opt in to the trade-offs that you are most willing to bear. There was this great New York Times op-ed from Alain de Botton a few years back. I think it was the most popular New York Times op-ed ever. And the headline was, "Why You'll Marry the Wrong Person." And his argument was basically, when we think about our potential partners, we love to sort of romanticize all of the things that are great about them. But maybe a better question is like, in what ways are they crazy? Or in what ways do they suck? And then what level of suck are you most willing to put up with? And what I like about it is it's a more realistic expectation. And the same is true for you. You know, it's easy to sort of romanticize others and to see the flaws in ourselves. But the truth is, like, every relationship, perfection is not a good ideal to strive for. And maybe if you sort of set your standards and then see your partner above those standards, maybe you have some agency to make the relationship work.
And just to clarify, you're not saying settling, like, because we've talked to, you know, like Eli Finkel and Paul Eastwick too have a scientific background in relationships, and it's all based on like what you build together. So the good enough mentality is just putting you in a situation that you can create with someone. It's not saying settle for the wrong person. Just want to clarify, because I hear people being like, but then I'm settling. We're not saying that.
Totally. Or maybe we just need to rebrand what it means to settle.
Well, that too.
There we go. Yeah. And the show is called Master of None. I had to look it up.
Oh, yes.
I need a certainty. I need an answer.
Yeah.
You think I can't sit with this ambiguity?
I need to know. And gosh, in all of this conversation, I just think about how I think what a lot of times what we miss is the level of discernment and confidence in our own choices. And I think about all the people who are going through divorce or breakups, and they're probably sort of so insecure in their next relationship. You know, like, am I making the right decision? Am I going to go through all of this again? That they have to go through a period of grounding themselves and knowing thyself, as John Gottman would say. Do you have any advice or any tips for people who have gone through a huge shift in their life and now they're in this major period of uncertainty? How do they get back to themselves again?
The first thing I'd say is to honor the transition. When you're going through a big breakup or there's been a big shift in your life, you get thrust into this sort of liminal space. You're neither here nor there. And I think part of our intolerance for uncertainty motivates us to want to get out of that liminal space as quickly as possible. So that might mean, you know, going back to your ex, or vowing to never date ever again, or like looking for this sense of certainty that feels like a toehold in this moment where you feel completely unmoored. And I actually think these liminal spaces of transition can be really generative. They can be spaces for a lot of growth and self-discovery. You might be able to discover things about yourself that you didn't previously know. Then I would say it's important that you have an opportunity to build back your foundation as an autonomous, independent, single person before you try to self-actualize through your relationship with someone else. And that might mean rediscovering parts of yourself that weren't honored, or values that weren't expressed as much when you were in the relationship, and really try and build that sense of self-confidence and self-assuredness. And so any sort of partner you find feels more like dessert as opposed to something that is like vital for you to feel whole as an individual. And then once you do put yourself out there, trying to have process instead of outcome-oriented goals. And so it's really easy to have this sort of binary of what I think of sometimes as like the departure fallacy. You know, you might have heard of like the arrival fallacy, where once you like get that promotion or you get married, you think everything is going to work out in your life. And then often people are disappointed when they realize that wherever you go, there you are. There's sort of another side to it that I think of as the departure fallacy, which is if you haven't sort of reached certain milestones by some rubric that is set out by, I don't know, the media or expectations or your parents, what have you, you know, like I want to be married by 30 and have a kid by 35 and own a house by 40 and yada, yada, yada. There can also be a level of freedom of understanding that those expectations might not actually be aligned with your own values. And it's okay to depart from the sort of societal expectation of what your life might look like. Like a quick metaphor, I used to be an international correspondent. So I used to be an international reporter. And so I spent a lot of time on the road and a lot of time in foreign countries and different cities. And there's this realization that I had maybe in my mid-20s that I wasn't going to be able to see it all. If I had a day or two free in Paris, there's no way I was going to be able to like hit all of the UNESCO heritage sites and like the top 10 sites that I had to see from whatever TripAdvisor. And there was a certain freedom of recognizing that I wasn't going to be able to see it all, which gave me permission to be more present in the moment. And I think there's a nice analog to the dating world where you don't necessarily have to like taste every flavor in the ice cream shop or like go to these different extremes to sort of calibrate your taste. You can just go one step at a time and try to just be present in the moment that you're in, whether it's on a date or relaunching that Hinge profile after not having one for a while, or, you know, going back out on a Friday night after staying in for many months in a row, and just really thinking about how you can reground yourself, not in a story of the past or wanting to hope for a better past, not in a story about the future of your expectations of exactly what your future life will look like, but just really try and stay grounded in the person that you are today.
I want to dive into this even more, but before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
We talk a lot on Dateable about being present in dating, but let's be real. That's hard when your phone is basically a third wheel. Enter Brick. Brick is a simple device that helps you put your phone down when you actually want to be in the moment. You just pair your phone to Brick and it locks you out of distracting apps, and suddenly you're not doom scrolling while your date is telling a story about their childhood dog. Whether you're on a first date, having a real conversation, or just trying to stop checking your phone every 30 seconds, Brick creates boundaries with your tech without asking you to delete everything or go full digital detox. Dating is about connection, not notifications. So if you want to be more present and honestly more attractive, check out Brick. Go to getbrick.app/dateable to get 10% off. That's getbrick.app/DATEABLE to get 10% off.
So I'm asking this next question for myself because I feel like this is something that comes through my mind a lot. So like, let's say you're in a long-term relationship, everything feels secure and good, but then you start to like think about like the external factors of like what could come, like money and children and your partner getting hit by a car or something like terrible happening. Like, again, that like not useful uncertainty. How do you ground yourself in a situation like this instead of letting your mind spiral to all these things that like could happen that there's no signs of happening today?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I'll say is you have to separate what you can control from what you can't control.
Yeah.
And I think so much of our stress in relationships, or as you think about the future of the world, are stressing about things that you have no power to control. I write a chapter in my book about climate change and sort of the anxiety that lots of people feel about climate change. And I talked to this expert on the topic, and she said basically the same thing that'll help you manage your anxiety is the same thing that'll help the climate crisis, which is trying to find one little thread that you have control over and pulling at that thread and taking action. You know, action can absorb some of that anxiety. And sometimes there's uncertainties in your relationship that is pointing to something that needs to be resolved. If you are feeling disconnected from your partner, or you're feeling like there isn't sort of a spark, or you haven't had an opportunity to connect in a romantic way in a long time, and you're feeling doubt about that, maybe that's something that's worth addressing with your partner and having a conversation about. But if you're worried about them getting hit by a car when they go off to work, maybe that is in the realm of something that you don't actually have power to control. The other thing I'll say is there is this psychological concept called bracing for the worst. And it comes from, the canonical example is a teacher is walking around the classroom handing back the test results, and your mind goes, oh, I'm going to fail this test. Here's all the reasons why I got everything wrong. And it's sort of a protective mechanism so that if you, say, get an 85%, then it's better than sort of like the F that you expected. And I think in some ways that is an adaptive quality, right? It's about sort of preparing for these worst case scenarios so that if you do get that worst case scenario, or more likely get something that's like one level above that worst case scenario, you'll be emotionally prepared for it. But I think there's another way that you can think about it, which is like how you might brace for the best, as opposed to asking like, what if everything goes wrong?
Right.
Ask yourself like, what if everything goes right? And being able to like see a vision of the future that doesn't lay in all of your tendencies to catastrophize or think about the worst things that can happen, but actually can give you a sense of hope about, your partner not getting hit by a car, or you building that happy family that what you once want. I think about the advice that you sometimes give to people that are learning how to ski, which is look where you want to go. And if you spend all of your time looking at the obstacles, you're likely to like ski into the tree. But if you look toward a vision of the future where you actually want to go, then you're more likely to manifest it.
I like that a lot. Thank you.
Julie, you going to sleep better tonight?
Hopefully, yeah.
And then you actually alluded to two of these already, but in your book, you do talk about the three traps that make us believe certainty exists when it really doesn't. So you talked about control. What are the other two?
The other two are comfort, which is our desire to stay where it's comfortable. I think, canonical example is someone who's in a relationship that they know isn't right for them, but they'd rather stay in the comfortable relationship than have to confront the uncertainty of what it would mean to leave. And hubris, which is our tendency to think that we know best. And I think, a dating example of this might be someone who has like a very narrow idea of who their future partner will be and is unwilling to sort of compromise or go outside of that scope. And the way that I frame it in the book is that, these are traps that we can fall into, the desire for too much control, the desire for too much comfort, the desire for too much hubris or too much knowing. And on the flip side of each of these traps is a virtue that might help you be more adaptive. So on the other side of comfort is the growth that comes from stepping outside of your comfort zone. On the other side of hubris is the humility that comes from being able to admit what you might not know. And on the other side of control is the acceptance that comes when you're able to say, I don't know exactly what the future holds, and that is okay. And so I think there's many different sort of ways in which you can frame this in a dating context. But at the end of the day, the sort of top level message is stop looking for certainty where there is none to be found. And if you're able to become friends with uncertainty, to collaborate a little bit with that sense of doubt that lives within you, you might be more able to discover things that you didn't previously know you could find.
Do you find like people tend to gravitate to one? Because like when you're saying all three, like for me, I'm like control is definitely my thing. Like I would stare at my phone and be like, if I look hard enough, this person is going to respond to me, or like, things that are like not in my control, but I like tricked myself into thinking it. Do you find that in your findings?
Yeah, I mean, with any framework, it's sort of like a model that helps you make sense of the world, and it's like incomplete and not always accurate, But I think there's like something in each of us that knows which tendency we have or what we might be more pulled towards. And that can be instructive of how we can get better at dealing with uncertainty. And so like one piece of advice, for example, that I give to people who are like too stuck in comfort is to do something consciously to get outside of their comfort zone. So sort of like uncertainty exposure therapy. Similar to if you had like a phobia of spiders, you might start by like looking at a picture of a spider and then like being in a room with a spider 20 feet away. And then like maybe you can get to a place where you're close to a spider again. The same is true with uncertainty. So like maybe you have a lot of desire for comfort or for control in your life, and you can do something outside of the realm of dating that can help rewire your brain to be okay with exposing yourself to a situation where you might have less control or you might be less comfortable. So even something that might seem innocuous, like taking a new route to work or ordering something different on the menu when you go out to dinner, or striking up a conversation with a stranger in a non-romantic way that you don't know exactly how it's going to go. These little micro experiments can rewire your brain and teach you that you can be in an uncertain situation and be okay. And though that sort of like practice environment will make it easier for you when you are in another uncertain situation that might have a little bit higher stakes.
Let's just remind people again why they should practice uncertainty exposure. What is on the other side for them, in case people need a little reminder?
Yeah, I mean, the whole point is that you don't know what's on the other side, but it's something that might be a great possibility that you didn't even know that you were exposed to. So like, I don't know the exact statistics here, but I have a friend who's a dating coach, and she said that like the vast majority of women on dating apps set their height minimum to something like 6 feet tall or 5'10" or something like that. But only like 20 or 30% of all men are above that limit.
I think it's like 15%. It's
Yeah,
really low.
very low.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know so much better than me. And so like, yes, maybe in your mind you have this idea of like ending up with like a really tall man, and that will like fulfill your dreams, or he'll be your Prince Charming or whatever. But if you're able to maybe push the boundaries of what you're willing to expose yourself to, you might discover that actually, if he's 5'9", it's not the end of the world. And there might be some things that you discover from exposing yourself to that uncertainty. And I think particularly with dating right now, and dating apps in particular, where there is this seemingly endless sea of other people out there, making decisions or committing to anything can feel like it comes with a lot of costs. I often think about this sort of like tree of all of these different potential paths that our lives can take. And the moment you commit, you decide to be exclusive with someone, or you decide to go on a date with someone, it can feel like you're foreclosing all of these other opportunities, which is why the opportunity cost feels so high. In that moment that you make a decision, you are conscious of all the things that you're letting go, but you're not yet conscious of the things that you might be gaining from continuing to go on the path that you've chosen. And so that is, I think, the best case for being more tolerant of uncertainty, is it allows you to discover what you might find that is outside of your expectations for certainty.
I just want to go back to a word, like a phrase you said earlier, the building the uncertainty tolerance, because I think that's so important. I mean, it obviously goes hand in hand with exposure therapy too, but are there any other techniques that, I mean, you've shared a lot of techniques, but are there anything else that you could leave people with as a way to like build up that tolerance for uncertainty and start to be okay with not knowing?
Yeah, I think one distinction that might be helpful is the difference between what I call acute uncertainty and more ambient uncertainty. So acute uncertainty is uncertainty about something that will be resolved. Will I pass the bar exam? What will be the results of this medical test that I've just undergone? And when it comes to acute uncertainty, I think about a decision tree. And the first question is, do I have the opportunity to influence the outcome? So say like you're really uncertain about where you're going to go to college and you're a senior in high school. If you haven't yet like submitted your applications, you can like do your darndest to write a really good application, or like try and actually influence the outcome of the uncertain feeling that you have. The next level down is, can you prepare for different potential situations? So sometimes the distress for uncertainty comes from having one really fixed vision of what the future will look. Rather than going all in on one vision, can you do some contingency planning and say, okay, if I don't get into my first choice college, these are other options I have. If I don't get into these colleges, this is what I can do. If I go to this college, here's how I can sort of find the silver lining in a potentially secondary outcome. And then the third level of the decision tree is how can you basically regulate your nervous system so that you're okay in the waiting. And I think about this a lot in the context of like, will they text me back questions, which is, you know, there's things that you can do like distract yourself. And one of the things that research has found is flow state activities can be great in these situations. So there's this one study where the research participants were waiting for the results of a test and they were forced to play a game of Tetris. And people who played a game that was like too easy or too hard really found a lot of distress in the waiting. But people who were playing a game that was sort of right at the right level of their challenge sort of got lost in the activity and it made it easier for them to wait. So there's like finding distractions or flow state activities. There's things like yoga or meditation that can like literally regulate your nervous system. So like deep breathing, finding ways to connect with nature so that the acute waiting is less harmful. And then at the end of the day, just, you know, about acceptance and not being able to control the outcomes. Like you won't be able to like determine whether he's going to text you back in the next hour, but you have the ability to do things in your life that make that waiting a little bit easier. And then there's a whole another category of more sort of ambient uncertainty, like the uncertainty of how or when we're going to die, or the uncertainty of like what AI will do to the job market, or the uncertainty of climate change, or the uncertainty of whether your husband will get hit by a car. And I think there's a whole like realm of other tactics that can help apply to those situations. But maybe some of the acute interventions could be helpful.
I love it. This conversation has been so insightful. I mean, I think some of my biggest takeaways, I mean, that image that you gave, like of the person on the boat in the fog, I think that will stay with me. And that's such a good metaphor, especially if you're in the thick of dating and you're like, nothing seems to be working out, but I know eventually I want to like meet that person. It's like, just keep going. A lot of times like people will come to us and it's like, you're not doing anything wrong. You need to just keep going. That's just the reality. So I think that was really helpful in these times where it does feel uncertain and we don't know what's going on. Is like, one, it's okay that you're in the fog. I think just being okay with uncertainty, which is really like the premise of your book, and like accepting it is like very liberating. That it's like you don't need to get all the answers, even though we live in a world where you can get an answer immediately. It's okay. And I think that parallel that you brought up really is why it feels so jarring, because like in every other parts of life, like we can get the answer. And then like the parts that are really like, you know, near and dear to us, that are that part that keeps us up at night, that we can't get the answer to, it feels like even more extreme because everywhere else you can. So I think being okay with uncertainty, I really liked what you said too about like some preparing for the worst is actually a way that you can like ground yourself, but also like how do you prepare for the best and look at what the best that could come and not just ground yourself in like everything that can go wrong. So I'm going to try doing that, is like when you find yourself in that state that you're going there, to like go there for a little and then step back and be like, okay, let me flip it around to like what could actually go really well in this period. Because I think this part around like if you never have uncertainty, you never have curiosity, you never have like the experience of something new happening, and like that is really what life is all about. So just even making that flip of like what is uncertainty giving me is a way to really like start to think about it a lot differently.
I love that. Well, very well said.
One thing that's really standing out for me from this conversation is that uncertainty is unavoidable in life. In fact, it is what makes up most of our life. It's like how our bodies are mostly water, life is mostly uncertainty. And for some reason, we've treated uncertainty not as the status quo, but more as like the outlier, which is interesting. Now that we're having this conversation, it's like, yeah, everything in life is uncertain. And what we have in modern society is predictability. We can predict when things can happen. Like I can predict that I will have lunch today. But back in the day, there wasn't even predictability because you just weren't sure where your next meal's coming or if you have shelter that night. So we've almost conditioned ourselves to treat predictability as certainty. And actually isn't. So the rewiring for me is to understand uncertainty is the baseline. It is the status quo of life. And if we don't embrace it, then we're not embracing all the reality that we have in this world. So one is embracing that this is the status quo, but two, also knowing that the uncertainty is what propels growth and what propels progress in society, in ourselves. So the more we can just experience the journey of uncertainty, is then we're able to translate that into some sort of personal growth.
Amen. Yeah, I'll do a quick teaser for the book, which is the opening anecdote I use is about a couple who have been together for 17 years. They've been married for 10. And they're out having a drink at a bar in New York City. They both know that something isn't quite right in their relationship. And so they decide to do something that others might see as insane, which is they decide for a year they're going to go their separate ways and then come back to the exact same bar and figure out whether they want to stay together. And they called it the year of living dangerously. And it's fascinating. In sort of like my informal survey of people that I ask, what do you think happened? It's about 50-50. Half the people are like, it's the Pina Colada song. Like they went their separate ways and they came back together, of course. And the other half is like, no, there's no way that they like got back together after spending their energy outside of the relationship for a year. And so you'll have to read the book to figure out what happens next.
Good teaser.
Leaving us with that cliffhanger. Was this a real, because you're a journalist, was this a story that you covered?
Yeah, all nonfiction. Yeah, I reported it out. One of the fun facts is their couples therapist was Esther Perel before Esther Perel became like Esther Perel.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So good.
Well, people will just have to read it. I mean, I can give my prediction, but I did read your book, so I don't want to.
Awesome.
Where can people find your book?
Well, the book is called How to Not Know. You can find it anywhere books are sold. You can go to howtonotknow.com. That will have all my socials and everything like that. Or just go to your local indie bookstore and build your uncertainty tolerance one page at a time.
It's such a great book. So thank you again for being on our show and talking about this topic. I think this topic is so important, and I'm so glad we were able to address it.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to wrap up this episode.
Stay dateable.
Dateable.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.